Hi, my name is Adrian, and welcome back to another episode of The Narrative. Today's episode is going to be about solitude. What is solitude? Well, solitude is a soil from which growth sprouts. In solitude, you'll gain the opportunity to conquer your own shadows and the shadows of the world around you, so that you can walk in the light without fear and with clarity and intent. Solitude is an interesting thing. To many, that word encapsulates loneliness, absence, disconnect, and discomfort. But that is because they're not embracing it in a way where it serves as a source of understanding, acceptance, and evolution. Sit through the pain and emotion of the things that are eating you up inside, and you'll come to realize that you're not only strong enough to feel the full depth of your pain and live, but you'll also gain the strength and the wisdom so that you can repurpose the root of that pain and progress without having those roots serve as an anchor. And all of a sudden, solitude becomes a source of power, vision, and progression. So, what's my story and how do I embrace solitude? In order to tell it, I actually want to backtrack to my teenage years so I can actually give you guys context to how the foundation was formed for my current life views. So, in my teenage years, I was living with my mom and I actually moved around a lot with her. I moved around and I transferred to a bunch of different schools, which means I never got the chance to actually make a ton of friends and build relationships with them. And as a byproduct, I was actually alone a lot of the time. So, in terms of actually having a purpose for my life and a sense of meaning, I actually adopted my mother's philosophy of purpose through Christianity. And as time went on, I began to question certain things about the religion, about the church, and about the Bible. And I realized that for some of those questions that I had, you could spend a whole lifetime chasing the answers to those questions. So what I did was said, you know what? I'm just not gonna make this a main focus of my life, and I'm going to instead focus on just living a life that is fulfilling for me. So I actually became quite curious as a teenager and developed all sorts of deep thoughts on life's nuances. I started thinking bigger picture in terms of what I actually wanted from life and how I was going to move to get to that point. The thing is, though, I never really felt like I had anybody to really engage in deep, meaningful conversations regarding these sorts of things. And the immediate adults in my life, had I had any sort of deep philosophical question, they will just slap a band aid on it and say, well, things are this way because God meant it to be this way. Trust God and He'll take care of you. And that just wasn't enough for me. That wasn't enough for me to understand the depths of what was going on internally for me, and it didn't wasn't enough for me to understand how everything going on in the world around me affected me as well. So as a result, I actually suffered a lot in silence. I felt because of those factors that I didn't really have anybody that would understand me and my struggles mentally, emotionally, and so on, just because I felt like compared to the people that I had around me, my views were so different regarding life. And as lots of teenagers can probably relate, there were plenty of moments where I felt mentally, emotionally, physically unstable. And that feeling of lack of direction and purpose, and that feeling of lack of understanding and support just made navigating through that part of my life difficult. Another interesting piece of that as well is that going through that phase, there were plenty of moments where I would have these sorts of mood swings where I would be perfectly fine. I'd be having a good time with my family or doing whatever I was doing. And then out of nowhere, something would trigger me and I wouldn't be able to pinpoint what the trigger would be. But out of nowhere, I would just be sad, mad, frustrated, and I couldn't figure out why. And honestly, that would drive me crazy. So eventually, I found healthy ways to cope and really decipher myself. And a habit that I picked up that actually helps with that a lot, I feel, is journaling. Whenever I got into these moods where I wasn't sure what the hell was wrong with me, I would actually break it down on paper. I would write down all the feelings that I was feeling, all of the thoughts that I was thinking, and I would question why I was feeling certain things and where those feelings were rooted from. And these are things that maybe I couldn't figure out right away. But as time went on and I kept on with this habit of journaling, eventually I was able to really get down to the root of why I felt certain things and what triggered me in certain ways. And it honestly just all in all just gave me an outlet of expression so that I can really understand myself. Eventually, I came to realize that I didn't have to handle all of that on my own, and I had people around me that cared. And even though that they might not understand or know what it's like to be in my shoes, the fact that I'm actually able to express what I'm feeling out to another person and have them hear me out, even though they might not have the best way to respond, I felt that that also did wonders in just relieving any sort of emotional, mental pressure that I was feeling. If you're going through something and you have people around you that care, it doesn't matter whether or not they know the full extent of your pain. It doesn't matter if they know what it feels like to be in your shoes. If you have someone that will listen, just just express yourself, reach out. It'll help so much. And even though this episode is about solitude, I would have never realized that I needed to lean on the support of the people that I had close to me already if it wasn't for me being in that space where I was alone and me being able to figure out through journaling that, hey, I have these people that always tell me, hey, I'm here for you. Reach out if you need me. And as time went on and I journaled more and more, I would notice a pattern. I would see myself writing down in my journal that, hey, I have XYZ person that I could talk to. I don't know why it's so hard for me to reach out, but they're there. And eventually, what ended up happening was I reached out to this person and expressed myself at a low point, and that was honestly like a really pivotal moment for me because ever since then, I felt like I could be myself, and I didn't really have these sorts of anchors that are just really holding me back, these emotional mental anchors. So yes, please utilize your support system if you have one. And you might feel like you don't have one. If you maybe change your perspective and you view a couple degrees, you might realize that there's someone in front of you this whole time that could support you if you just opened up. Another huge influence that I had while I was navigating these waters in my earlier years was the music that I listened to. I listened to lots of introspective music of different hip hop artists, whether it be Kendrick or J. Cole, just artists that just really tell their story and how they've navigated through life and the tough parts of their life. And I could really take their stories and really apply the lessons that they expressed and the values that they express through their music and just really use that to help formulate myself and my understanding and the understanding of myself if that really makes sense at all. Fast forward some time and these habits that I really used as a coping mechanism actually allowed for me to develop a system where I was able to understand myself, understand any emotions that I get come up, and understand the purpose behind my actions. Now whenever there's something that's really overwhelming me or I'm getting a really intense emotion, it's not really hard for me to figure out where that stems from because throughout the years I've built up habits and systems to really be able to break that down to its root and really move from there. And I would have never been able to get to that point without having countless nights where I cried, literally crying myself to sleep, wondering why things were a certain way and why I couldn't understand where a buildup of these intense emotions of sadness, anger, and restlessness even came from. The more self aware I became, the more intent came behind my every action. The easier it became for me to share my story with others, and the easier it became for me to decipher my consciousness whenever I became unsettled. The more I embraced solitude, the more I was able to use it as a source of growth where I'm able to do all of that and more. If it's one piece of advice that I want to give to anybody who might be struggling internally based off of my journey and experiences, it would be to sit with your emotion. You're going to need to feel it and all of its depth in order to figure out where it stems from and how to have it not really anchor you as much anymore. Tell yourself it's okay to feel the way that you do and that there's nothing you can do to change whatever happened that's causing that emotion to feel. But what you can do is actually repurpose that fuel and have it push you in a direction that fulfills you rather than have that route drain you. Today, I spend a lot of my time alone. In this chapter of my life, I welcome and I embrace solitude fully. In fact, whenever things start to get overwhelming, I make it a personal point to spend time with myself so that I can decipher what's going on internally, so that I can go for a run, work out, and really relieve my stress levels so I can hone my focus and move forward with clarity. Something else that I wanted to touch on this episode is gratitude. Through this journey, I came to appreciate life and all that it had to come with. Because I explored the depths of my pain and my suffering, I recognize and appreciate every single step in this journey of life much more deeply. Every single person that I met had a purpose in my life. Every single experience that I've endured has a purpose in my life. Every piece of emotional turmoil that I've gone through, every obstacle that I've faced up until this point today has put together a mosaic that represents who I am today. And for that, I'm grateful. So that's all I had for today. It was a short episode, and I hope that somebody out there was able to take something of value from this. Solitude, it's important. It's not something that people should run away from. When you're alone and you're able to embrace yourself and everything that you have going on internally, that's where you're going to grow the most. So, for anybody that out there that's going through something, find healthy ways to cope so that you can actually understand what's going on inside of you and you can use that to move with intent, move with clarity, and move with purpose. Thank you guys for watching another episode of The Narrative. And please write down in the comments your biggest takeaway. You guys have a question for me. Literally anything. In a couple of episodes, I'm going to be choosing from the comments going forward, and I'm going to be starting my episode or ending my episode with highlighting one or multiple comments that I want to respond to and go from there. But yeah, that's that. You guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of your night, and peace.